Traveling to other places gives you experiences that you would not normally have. Like, for instance, seeing Stonehenge makes you contemplate ancient life. You're lost in a crowd in a place where nobody looks like you or speaks the same language as you. It hopefully gives you a deeper empathy for all walks of life. Then you go home and you reflect on what you've learned, and hopefully you're a little bit of a better person for it. Right? And in a way, getting to know other people in life and learning about their experiences can also teach you a lot. The thing is, though, I'm not the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm also not a castle in like another country. So I don't love it when you learn from me, but then never visit me again or really care about me all that much, despite that you've learned from me. Because, I'm a person and not a landmark. Just saying. I'm Lauren Blair Donovan, and people find it way too interesting that I have lost my parents and some friends. In some cases, people have questions and want to know the gory details and even seem emotionally intelligent in the moment, and I have good conversations with them, but then they go about their life, and that's fine. But oftentimes these people then don't check up on me, despite me telling them that it's been hard, to be orphaned before most of my peers even come close to that, even though they found me so interesting and learned a lot from me. Like, good grief, I did not sign up for that. That's not what I want. I'm not an emotional tour guide. I first heard the term tourist used in a non-literal sense in an episode of Parks and Rec. Justin Theroux's character was this really great guy on paper who was dating Leslie Knope, and they're at this dinner party, and Leslie found him to be kind of exhausting, and she goes to Ron Swanson and says, "Why am I not more into him?" And he says, "Because he's a tourist. He collects stories and adventures from people and moves about his business, goes about his life. He never makes a real commitment." I forget all the wording verbatim, but it was something to that effect. And he also went on to extrapolate that this is not somebody looking for roots or sincere connection. This is somebody who's just collecting experiences. I thought that was super interesting because I had met people like that in life who definitely seem to be in it for the experiences but don't know how to be present, don't understand what deep and meaningful long-term connections with people can be, platonic, professional, romantic, doesn't matter. And people who ironically kind of deprive themselves of getting past the superficial point, which can be the most interesting, I think, experience you can have with people and experiences and all that jazz. So you're too busy being adventurous and curious about too many things at once. After my mom died, which if you've watched this series, you know that it was 7 months or so after I moved to Los Angeles, meaning that most people in my life were pretty freaking fracking new to me and had very limited context as to who I was and what I had also been through previously, like my dad dying, amongst other things. So people understandably had questions. In Los Angeles, there's a lot of people who are in therapy and or are artists and tend to be into self-exploration and psychology and learning. So I found myself with a lot of people who were emotionally intelligent in that they understood deep, broad, big emotions, and they kind of felt like safe spaces when they would ask me a million questions. Because believe it or not, I do have some boundaries. I don't tell everything to everyone, but I was also in the midst of grieving, and I was raw and exposed and probably more open than I would normally be. And some of the people I've met, like I said, were great in certain ways, but what I did not take into account was that they were more interested in hearing about my stories than they were interested as me as a fully fleshed, three-dimensional, multifaceted human being. And what I mean by that is people weren't very good at maybe checking up on me after I told them some deep, dark feeling I was having about my lot in life, or maybe they heard some horrific detail that was something I experienced in the process of either or both of my parents dying, and I had to do all the emotional labor in the friendship. For the most part, there's people that I quickly kind of dialed back from because they did not seem to maybe have my best interests at heart. But even to this day, I feel like I have some people in my life who I love a lot and they've earned a spot in my life, but I still can't help but wonder if people really get that the experiences that I have been through are something that I live with every day. And there's something, depending on the week, the month, the season, the year, I maybe carry closer to me than it seems because maybe I'm being triggered, maybe things are being compounded. I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of people are obvious and blatant emotional tourists, and I'm not a fan. But I think some people who really can go deep and are friends can accidentally be emotional tourists in a more lighthearted way, in a way that's not terrible, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt sometimes. I added the term emotional to tourist, emotional tourist, after my mom died because, yeah, I found that to be especially true. And frankly, I think that's all of us to some extent. I think every single person in our life has been through something that we just haven't walked in those shoes. We just don't know firsthand what it's like to be them. And we hear their stories and we seek to understand, and we do our best, but we probably miss certain bullet points. I'm not trying to vilify everyone except for like maybe the worst case, because there's other stuff probably going on there. I think this is more a call for all of us to just, myself included even, like the more I do these videos, the more I think, do I even handle people who are grieving correctly? What can I do better? And the more I hear about other people's just stories in life, as well as the more I think about what makes me angry with what my friends do, I sometimes have to stop and be like, but am I as good at that as I wish my friend was being? I think anything having to do with deep emotions is going to be misunderstood and mishandled, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'm just trying to shine a spotlight on an all too human thing that we do, where we find people interesting, but we kind of forget to follow up or have actions prove that we care, and not just, are using people for our own knowledge or, for an acting class trying to understand what it's like to be inside the mind of an orphan or whatever. People think that they're being helpful by talking once, but then never following up. Grief is not linear. Grief is a lifetime. Let's talk about what can be done better. And if you're still confused about the term emotional tourist, I guess what I mean is it's somebody who kind of tricks me into thinking that they care more than they do, and I tell them about my experiences or my thoughts and feelings about what I've been through, because it seems like with the language that they're using and the concern that they're showcasing makes me think that they can handle deeper and murkier waters, and then they kind of leave me to my own devices, and I'm like, oh, I just shared a piece of myself to people who don't care and or don't know how to properly follow up with me. It's like at SeaWorld, everyone's snapping photos of Shamu and thinks that Shamu is like great. Is Shamu still alive? I actually don't even know this. I am clearly a child of the 90s. Is he still alive? He? I should have done my research on this before I did the video, but whatever. But regardless, you're having fun watching Shamu taking photos. But when you go home, you're not going to think about his living conditions. You're not going to be thinking about how ethical it is to even like watch marine life do tricks in captivity. It's like, I feel you, Shamu. It's not a perfect metaphor, but I don't like it when people think I'm interesting and then go home and don't wonder if my living conditions are great or my, state of existence is great. So I think where we kind of go wrong is we live in a culture where we're constantly looking to better ourselves, whether it's we want to learn more, whether we're working towards a physical goal, whether we have a career goal. Do we need more culture? Do we need to volunteer? Do we need more time for ourselves? Will that be the key that unlocks our happiness and living our best lives? And all of that is super great. Like, I am here for that. And who wants to be someone that never evolves, never experiences anything, never lives, never has interesting conversations with people whom they cannot relate to? Like, this is all good stuff. I'm not mad at it. I think the problem, though, is that what gets a little lost in translation about bettering oneself, and I'm going to have other videos that's going to probably tackle this in so many ways because it's something that's been super on my mind probably my whole life, but especially in the post-pandemic I think we're kind of back in the pandemic, whatever stage of the pandemic we're in, this is where I'm at. I think we forget that life is a team sport. We are social animals. We are not supposed to be solitary. There's a lot of places I'm going to take that to in different videos, but I guess what I mean in this case We get so fixated on fixing our own lives, bettering ourselves, learning about ourselves, and we sometimes, I think, forget, even if we're not selfish, I think we forget to remember that not everything is going to just be through our lens. Not everything is going to be through our perspective. So when we hear somebody that's had any experience, because I don't think this video, I think compared to every other video, this is the most relatable to any kind of trauma or life upset or life experience that is different or has some otherness. People can be voyeuristic, people can be emotional tourists. And so I think we forget that when we are learning about someone else, we're going to have our own opinions, we're going to have our own reactions, we're going to have our own thoughts, but that other person is real. They're not a book, they're not a movie, they're not a castle. Like they're a real person who's sharing personal experiences. And unlike when you watch a documentary, unlike when you read a book, unlike when you tour the world, that person's going to have a memory of you sharing that experience with them. It sounds a little Captain Obvious, and I hear it, but I think we forget to take stock of that, and that everything is happening to us, but also everything is happening to everyone. And if someone is sharing something personal with you, I mean, there's a million reasons why people do that, and there's definitely people that overshare, and there's definitely people that share too quickly. I'm not pretending every situation is earnest, but a lot of the times people are sharing because they're trying to bond, they're trying to be vulnerable, they're trying to look for a safe space of people who are going to see them and understand them and care about them. And I think it's so easy when they do that to have empathy and to feel concerned and to like wonder how they're doing, but we, for whatever the reason, don't always reach out to tell people that, which is silly because none of us are mind readers. Maybe taking this off of a more individual basis, think about any time that you're reading about people who are going through a natural disaster. Think about any time you hear of somebody who's super, super ill and they have a GoFundMe. Think about marginalized groups, minorities. Anytime that somebody is trying to speak about a trauma that they're going through, or the news is telling you about a trauma that people are going through, it's so easy to just stop and listen and be like, man, that's terrible. Do you donate? Do you volunteer? Do you have the conversations that are tough that are going to help change the hearts and minds of people that don't realize that there's a problem? How do you show support? I think it's a too human thing that we watch problems happen or we watch people in pain, but we don't do enough to really truly help those problems be lessened. I think some of it is because we do get a little lost behind our own perspective, and we forget, not because we're sociopaths, but we forget that other people are going through emotions that we probably can't even see. No matter how much they explain what they're going through, there's just going to be idiomatic expressions and we cannot feel their pain literally. But I also think that people can accidentally be misguided because they don't know what to do, which is fair. Not knowing what I should do is the number one reason why I don't help out with whether it's tragedies that are bigger than me, like things that are happening on a national or community scale, as well as like people in my own life who are going through stuff. Sometimes I don't know what to do and I get stuck. Again, this is not a video to villainize. This is a video to kind of bring attention to the all too human stuff that we all do, what we can do better, and also as a griever or anyone going through any kind of trauma, maybe to help better identify these behaviors, because it's not fun. It's not fun. It's not fun being Shamu. I'm not going to say it again. It's not fun. But to extrapolate, it's so hard to know when to step up because you never want to project onto somebody that they need stuff or need help even when they don't. Like, you don't want to insult them by overstepping or being overbearing or smothering them or acting like they can't do things on their own. And I mean, yeah, it's absurd and narcissistic to act like you're the only hero in someone's life, especially if you're not that close with them. So these are all valid concerns that I hope most of us grapple with, because at least we're considering if and when we should step in versus being like, F it, they got it under control and I don't care. Like, that'd be a bad look. But the problem with us not searching enough to see if there is something we can do better is that the bystander effect can happen, which is when everyone assumes a problem or someone is being taken care of, and therefore no one takes care of it because everyone's too busy assuming everybody else is taking care of it. That's not fun. So what do we do to fix this? I think the rule of thumb should be that if you cared enough to ask someone's story or ask for details or ask how they feel or how they're doing, it's worth texting a few days later or a week later just to check in. You can blatantly say, how are you doing? Which I totally recommend if someone was like, I'm struggling. Like if that was the theme, overarching theme of what they were talking about, I highly, highly, highly recommend doing that because they're literally saying they're not doing well. So show them that someone cares, that they're not doing well. Say, how are you doing? Are you feeling any better? Is there anything I can do to help you this week? Do you want a distraction? Do you want to go out? Do you want a phone call? Do you want to talk again? Especially in this day and age of text where you don't even have to call someone. I mean, it's amazing, guys. Like what texting makes it so easy, so non-confrontational, and gives the griever or the person living the trauma of any kind a second to decide how and if and when they want to respond. You know, you're not putting them on the spot by like calling or even worse, like FaceTiming without their permission that it's a good time to FaceTime. Just text. It's easy. And if it's not clear how they're doing, I mean, if someone's shared a personal share with you, just pick up the emotional labor, even in small ways, like sending them a funny meme or a funny tweet or anything that's just keeping the olive branch being extended and continuing to maybe bond with them. I've said it before in past videos, but I never reach out to anybody that isn't reaching out to me when I'm in hard times. I don't remember who said, let me know if you need anything. The people who often were doing a combo of asking how I was doing every so often, as well as just keeping me updated on their lives, texting dumb stuff that would make me laugh, things of that nature. When the going got really rough, those are the people that I remembered because I felt bonded to them. It felt like they were not making me do all the emotional labor, which in my mind meant that they cared. So those are the people that I reached out to. So if it's not clear if someone's still struggling with something or if someone is struggling at all with something, if you cared enough to ask, you wanted to bond. And if they cared enough to share, they wanted to bond. Maybe pick up the next couple steps of emotional labor so they feel seen and feel like you're not forgetting that they've been through hard stuff and you're seeing them for who they are, not judging whatever the hard stuff is. Like just pick up the ball a little bit. But like, don't just listen to their story. Find it interesting and then forget about them or show no effort or care towards them. Like that's gross AF. Like that needs to be normalized as gross behavior. It does. And hey, if you don't want to do that work, don't ask questions. A lot of people see someone asking them questions as a sign of interest or bonding. If you're not interested in doing that with that individual, do you have a right to ask them personal questions? No, I don't think you do. I don't. Like, if you're not interested in how someone's healing, why would you want to be a voyeur in someone else's trauma? Like, who hurt you? Like, seriously, like, think about it in those terms. That's weird. But also, I love that we talk about boundaries more as a culture, but we often mistake it as, like, how boundaries about how people should treat us. But boundaries are more about setting boundaries for ourselves, whether it's we're not going to allow certain behaviors from people, therefore not putting ourselves in positions that we don't want to be in, like being someone's friend or caretaker or therapist accidentally for somebody that you don't want to do that for. And the best way to not do that for is maybe don't show curiosity in their lives and make them bond to you in that way. And again, this is something we all need to work on. Like, I can have a little bit of a bleeding heart, and I definitely, like, it's my mission in life to never let someone feel the way that I did when it felt like the world turned its back on me and there were different things going on with me personally when a lot of people in my life died. But I've also had to reframe that as I can be kind to everyone, but I don't have to overextend because not everyone is healthy for me. Because frankly, also me and whoever else may not even be a good fit for each other. And some people are way above my pay grade, emotionally speaking, in terms of how they process stuff or their boundaries with how they do the processing. Like, some people are above our pay grade emotionally speaking, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can be kind, we can help when we can. But if you don't want to be in a position of friendship or helping someone, don't show interest in what they've been through. I mean, don't be like a brick wall. If it comes up, it comes up, but you don't have to be overly curious so you know what's going on when you're not interested in how that person's going to be doing long term. That's the difference that I'm trying to establish. There's other ways you can be supportive and be a human without being a voyeur. Because look, guys, it hurts. It really does. I walked into 2020 obviously not knowing how the plot was going to change, but in the pandemic, there's a small handful of Los Angeles friends that I walked into 2020 thinking I was really close with. Not talking much, I should say, to most of them. I have a friend that I went into 2020 thinking that we were closer than we were. But as the pandemic unfolded, I realized, oh no, she's an emotional tourist. She is somebody who finds me interesting for various reasons that I can connect the dots with that I'm not going to out because it could be too revealing. She finds me interesting, but even before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of the emotional labor. I told her some dark things about how sad I was about certain things, or how I remember right before 2020, it was the holidays, and those were very triggering times for me. She never checked up on me, even though she was so helpful in that conversation. It sucks to feel like somebody understands you in the moment, again, because a lot of these emotional tourists are actually emotionally intelligent. Like, they have the lingo. They're not overly simple, in how they process things. But I'm like, oh shoot, I'm doing the emotional labor, and that the pandemic really showed that. Like, the 2020 version of the pandemic really showed who was an emotional tourist in my life and who wasn't. And knowledge is power, but it hurt. It really hurt to be like, oh, this person just doesn't get where I'm coming from because I'm interesting to them, is living what they find interesting. It's gross. I don't like it. This wraps it up because there's only so much to say about some of it, to be honest. Like, it's not a well-known phenomenon. It's sort of made up in my own head, but I think it's a real thing because I watch it, again, with other people, not just with grief and not just with myself. Emotional tourism, we all do to some extent. I'm just sort of observing it in this video and saying why I think it's happening and how I think we can all be better, because I think we only know our own experiences, but learning from other people really is different than learning from other means of learning. And if it's a sad or traumatic or at the time raw experience that we're learning from, what do we owe each other? Not to sound like the good place, but maybe check in on the person or try to be a good friend to the person that taught you about grief or taught you about what it's like to have a different experience or what it's like to have an illness. I think we can all do better with that. So let's all do that. Let's try to do that. Belated New Year's resolution. Let's all not be emotional tourists. Let's only ask when we really want to know and follow up when we do know. Simple enough, right? That does it for today. I am Lauren Blair Donovan. I am on Instagram and also now TikTok at Blairosaurus_Rex on both. Twitter at Blairosaurus_Rex. If you have not already subscribed, naughty, but I will forgive you if you go subscribe now. No big deal. Great girl like that. Very forgiving. And please leave a comment if you have anything to say. If you agree, if you've never heard of this, what your experiences with emotional tourism are. Let's normalize dialogues about grief, guys. So I'm excited for the next video because it's kind of the other side of the same coin. It's going to be about intellectualizing grief, which probably sounds really different, but spoiler alert, I don't think it is, because it's almost trying to make every grieving situation about the wisdom or about like the mechanics of sadness and bad situations, which is good and helpful. I'm overly logical and like that kind of stuff within reason, but at times it can be also very dehumanizing. So that's what next video is going to be. So hit that subscribe button so I see you next time. Bye, everyone.